Yeah, hello everyone. Welcome to my lightning talk about workflow engines and an experiment that I recently did in terms of CI/CD. Who am I? My name is Nele and I work at a company called Camunda. We actually do workflow technology. I'm a developer advocate, and actually I put here the butler because I'm not a DevOps person, and I have to confess this right in the beginning, so I guess you have more experience when it comes to CI than I do. But still, I tried out something because I wanted to know how can a workflow engine maybe fit into the CI/CD world. And let's have an understanding what a workflow engine is doing. So basically the idea is that we have multiple steps defined as a workflow that the engine then executes. And you can see here a language that is graphical but executable at the same time. That's BPMN. And that's getting quite handy if you look at operation tools and stuff like that. Your workflow becomes really explainable because you have something graphical there as well. And the steps actually can consist of multiple types of tasks. So you can have code that is connected to your workflow, and you basically add it to your code environment, and then you can do whatever you want in your task implementation. You also can have user tasks, where you have users in your end-to-end process, and you need to make sure you kind of provide a UI for them, and then also a send task for like sending emails, but that's actually the same implementation with code. So you basically really have a workflow engine for automating your end-to-end business process, and that's the main use case, I would say. And now if we think about CI/CD, of course there are workflows as well, and I think a very common workflow everyone knows and can relate to is actually the CI/CD pipeline. And we have also here a workflow consisting of multiple steps: development, build, test, stage, deploy. And they are very well-known tools that help us building this pipeline. I think that's where the Butler picture comes from. That's why I relate so much to Butler when I talk about CI/CD. So Docker is a good way to also to use, but Jenkins mainly is responsible for your pipelines. And using a workflow engine, maybe we can now also build this inside the workflow engine. That's the experiment, right? So we can do that and define service tasks. We can say build, test, stage, deploy. Actually, that's not a good idea. Don't do that. Because if you start doing that, you will end up writing a lot of custom code there, and Jenkins already provides all the functionalities you need here to do the testing and to provide the pipeline here for you. So in general, that's the first learning from the experiment. Don't try to automate something where you already have really good tools for. But then, what's this experiment about? Is everything like for the waste bin? Certainly not. Because actually, CI/CD is not just about the pipeline process, it is even beyond. And now I took something from our own company. We do open source software, so we do have release processes, and a release process can get quite complex. So it has parts before the pipeline and parts after the pipeline. So let's have a look into a team collaboration when it comes to the end-to-end release process. And this is already simplified. So there are even multiple steps, and there are multiple teams that need to collaborate. So we first need to make sure that we check licenses. If we include other packages and other technologies, we have to make sure everything is within the open source license definition. We have to build a release candidate, and then we do certain steps like adjust the documentation and also prepare a blog post. And then actually here where you see the thick line around it, that's where actually the CI/CD pipeline starts. But then even afterwards, we do certain steps with different teams, and you can see already some steps are done manually, where you see the user task, and some stuff we can automate. For example, like release Maven Central coordinates and release the Java docs. And you can imagine now, okay, when we talk about continuous delivery, we are not talking about minor releases, but we also sometimes have smaller releases we want to do. So a workflow engine also has the possibility here, if you want to picture the end-to-end process, that you have like a data evaluation point and say, hey, is this a minor release? And if not, you do other steps besides. So you have really the possibility here to have the state where you are in your release process, to see at what point you are, and to monitor that. I think that's one benefit where you could consider including a workflow engine within the whole process of delivering software. Another part is what is if your test scenarios are getting more complex? I recently talked to someone using the workflow engine actually to have the state of very long-running tests. It was an integration with external services, and the person told me one test runs for 3 days. And during that 3 days, it can be very beneficial to know where you are with your tests and have someone who maintains the state for you, because that's something the workflow engine really can do for you, having the state. Another thing you might consider is if things are getting more complex in general. So who of you is using Jenkins for something they know they should not use Jenkins for? Okay, some, right? So if you have that, or if you have that scenario where you feel you squeeze in something into a tool where you reach the border basically of that tool, you might think maybe there are other solutions. And a workflow engine is not just handy for handling the state, but also if you consider batch processing, where it can become very handy is you have an operation tool that is able to show you when you have problems. So it shows you all the failure. You also can set retries. So you can define retry strategies, and you have a way to observe failure. And even if you have failure, and sometimes you expect failure, within that language, you have a way of putting that into your workflow. It's a handy symbol here. It's a BPMN error event. So you could say, this is an error I would expect. But I don't want to finish the whole thing, or I don't want the whole process to fail. So what I want to do is I want to give the team maybe a reminder that there is something wrong in the task, and then they have the chance to fix it, and then I basically retry. So you have the possibility also to define the retry within your process model of the workflow engine. And you can see here again, that's in Java. You can connect that to your Java code and then throwing this error so the workflow engine can accordingly act to it and move the process to the state where it belongs. So what are the takeaways of using a workflow engine when it comes to CI/CD? So I think the first one is to have an overview of the end-to-end view of processes, of release processes. So it does not stop where the pipeline stops, but normally something comes before and something comes after. And also another point is, if you have more complex scenarios, it could make sense to look into the options how a workflow engine can help to handle state and more complex scenarios. If you want to see more about it, we have a booth actually at the conference. I'm happy to show you some demonstration, especially when it comes to retrying and error handling. 10 minutes was basically just too short for it. Thanks for joining.